A dog was barking non-stop at a pile of debris. When rescuers looked closer, what they found shocked the world. The morning after the earthquake, the small town of Ashbury, California, no longer looked like itself. Streets were torn open, homes had collapsed into piles of debris, and thick clouds of dust still hung low in the air. The 7.2 magnitude tremor had shaken the earth just before dawn, and now the town was buried under silence, broken only by the whir of helicopters overhead and the crackling radios of search and rescue teams combing through the wreckage. Emergency crews, volunteers, and firefighters worked side by side, their boots crunching over shattered bricks and broken glass. Some called out names, hoping someone might answer. Others dug with their bare hands through splintered wood and crumbling concrete. Each second mattered. Every sound held the possibility of life beneath the rubble. Amid the chaos, one sound stood out. A dog barking, sharp and rhythmic. At first, no one paid it much attention. Barking dogs were everywhere during disasters, driven to panic or disoriented by the noise and confusion. But this dog, small and scrappy with mottled fur and the build of a shepherd mix, was not barking out of fear. His eyes were fixed, his body tense, and his voice unwavering. He stood at the edge of a collapsed townhouse, paws planted in ash and dust, tail rigid behind him. Every few seconds, he barked again, loud and deliberate, then turned to look at the rescuers before barking once more. A firefighter nearby glanced over and frowned. "Whose dog is that?" "No idea," someone replied, pulling at a chunk of drywall. "Stray maybe. He's been at it for 15 minutes. But the dog did not move. He continued barking, then pawed at the debris, his nails scraping against a slab of cracked tile. Then he looked up again, straight into the eyes of one of the volunteers. Something in that look stopped her cold. "Hold up," she said, dropping to her knees beside the dog. "Wait a second." She pressed her ear close to the rubble, her hand steadying herself against the shifting pile. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the distant drone of machinery and Lucky's barking. Then, faint and muffled, almost drowned in silence, she heard it. A cry. Not loud, not strong, but unmistakable. "Baby!" she gasped, standing quickly. "There is a baby down there!" Voices shouted, radios crackled. Within seconds, a coordinated team surrounded the area, shovels and crowbars in hand. Paramedics stood by. Lucky stepped back but did not leave. He sat, panting, eyes still locked on the same spot, his body trembling. The command captain looked at him, then at the volunteer. "He led us here?" She nodded. "He would not stop." The captain's voice cut through the air. "Dig, carefully, now!" And so they did, because a dog had spoken louder than the noise, louder than the fear, and in that moment everyone listened. Long before he stood atop the rubble barking for help, Lucky had been just another forgotten soul wandering the edges of the world. He was not born with a name. For most of his early life he drifted through the thick woods outside Ashbury, a skinny shadow barely noticed. He had no collar, no chip, and no home. People sometimes caught a glimpse of him near the highway or rummaging through trash cans behind the grocery store, but whenever someone got too close, he bolted. His eyes held the look of a creature who had learned that humans were not safe, that hands could hurt more often than they helped. Winter had come hard the year before. Temperatures had dropped below freezing. Food was scarce. Lucky was limping from a deep gash on his hind leg, likely from barbed wire, and his body had become skeletal. He no longer ran when people approached. He simply lay still in the snow, waiting. That was when Martha found him. She was in her late 70s, a widow with no children, and no one left in her quiet little house at the end of Sycamore Lane. She spotted Lucky curled up behind her garden shed one icy morning, shivering, eyes glassy. Instead of yelling or calling animal control, she had simply knelt beside him and whispered, "You do not have to be scared anymore." It took nearly an hour to coax him inside, and another week before he let her touch him. But Martha was patient. She gave him space, then warmth, then a name, Lucky. Slowly the frightened creature became something new. His eyes lost their panic. His ribs began to disappear beneath a coat that grew glossy and full. He learned to sit when she called, to nuzzle her hand when she read in the evenings, and to wait by the door every morning when she went out to feed the birds. Martha would hum as she cooked, often saying aloud, "You are not just lucky, you are my luck." They had one full year together. Then, one spring morning, Martha did not come down the stairs. The paramedics said it had been peaceful, a passing in her sleep. But Lucky did not understand peace. He waited by the bedroom door. He paced. He whined. When they carried her out on a stretcher, he howled until his voice broke. For days, Lucky refused to eat. He lay in front of the door, watching, waiting. He did not run when the neighbors came. He did not resist when they brought him to the local animal shelter. But he did not live either. He barely lifted his head. His food bowl remained full most days. Even the other dogs stayed away. Lucky had lost his purpose. Again. Then came the earthquake. The shelter building rattled, but stood. Amid the chaos and fear, the staff barely noticed when one kennel door, damaged from the tremors, had popped open. By the time they realized Lucky was gone, he was already miles away, racing through the shattered streets of Ashbury. He ran past fallen streetlights and crumbled sidewalks, past sirens and smoke. He ran without hesitation, and when he stopped, it was in front of a pile of twisted bricks and broken timber, where he began to bark, not wildly, but with certainty, again and again, as if something had told him, "This is where you are needed now." Dust rose in choking clouds as the rescue crew worked with shovels, crowbars, and gloved hands, digging where Lucky had stood barking with such urgency. At first, they did not believe. No thermal imaging picked up signs of life. The structure was unstable, the pile of debris shifting slightly with every move. Some doubted there was anyone left to save beneath such a collapse. But Lucky did not leave. He stayed beside the cracked foundation, pawing at the fractured bricks and barking in the same steady rhythm, always directing his energy toward the same corner of the wreckage. When the crew paused to assess the situation, Lucky growled low and barked again, as if begging them not to stop. After nearly 2 hours of digging, one of the rescuers, a firefighter named Joel, paused and leaned down. "Hold up," he said, pressing his ear to the narrow gap in the wall. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faint, almost too soft to be real, a voice. A child's cry. "Someone's alive down there," Joel shouted. "Get the medics now. We need oxygen and support beams, fast." The team sprang into motion. With renewed urgency, they worked through layers of plaster, insulation, and wood. Carefully, inch by inch, they carved out an access tunnel, wide enough for a camera probe. What they saw on the screen stole the breath from every person watching. A woman, barely conscious, was shielding a small child beneath her arms. They were wedged between two leaning interior walls, barely able to move, surrounded by wreckage on all sides. Dust covered their faces. The woman's leg was pinned, and her lips were cracked and dry. The child, a girl no older than 3, was curled against her chest, breathing weakly. "She's alive," someone whispered. "They're both alive." Lucky, still at the edge of the gap, leaned forward and stretched his snout toward a narrow crevice. The little girl stirred at the movement. Her eyes fluttered open. Then, in one quiet, powerful moment, Lucky gently licked her tiny hand through the space. The cameras caught it. So did one of the rescuers with a handheld phone. The image was shared before the rescue even finished. A dusty, aging dog offering a soft touch of hope to a child who had been lost beneath concrete and silence. With braces and backboards, they pulled the woman out first. She cried weakly, gripping the rescuer's arms, whispering, "My baby, please." "She's next," someone said. "We've got her." When the little girl emerged, wrapped in a foil blanket, blinking in the sunlight, the entire crowd waiting outside the caution tape broke into applause. News crews had arrived. Neighbors had gathered. Strangers began to cry. The child was placed on a stretcher, her small hands still reaching out, until Lucky was brought over. One of the rescuers gently lifted him and carried him to her side. She smiled faintly and touched his ear. Lucky leaned against her without a sound, and yet, even then, Lucky kept glancing back at the wreckage, ears perked, eyes scanning the rubble, as if to ask, "Is there anyone else still in there?" One rescuer, a hardened man who had served in disaster zones for over a decade, wiped a tear from his cheek. "If it had been 30 minutes later," he said, voice cracking, "if that dog had not led us here, they would not have made it. No way." No one argued. The entire town had just witnessed something they would never forget, and the dog who had once been forgotten had just reminded the world what it means to matter. In the days that followed the rescue, Lucky's story swept across the country like wildfire. News anchors called him the dog who listened when no one else did. His face, dusty, eyes alert, tongue gently touching a child's hand through shattered stone, became a symbol of unexpected heroism. Major networks ran features. Social media platforms overflowed with tributes, artwork, and heartfelt posts. Hashtags trended. Messages poured in from every corner of the United States. At the animal shelter, the phones rang nonstop. Dozens of families drove in from hours away, hoping to meet the dog who had saved a child from the wreckage. Volunteers lined up to walk him, speak to him, offer him toys and treats and affection. But Lucky did not respond. He lay in the far corner of his kennel, head resting between his paws, eyes quietly watching the door. When strangers approached, he blinked but did not move. He sniffed their hands politely, then turned away. It was not fear nor aggression. It was as if he was waiting for someone specific, for something more than praise or petting. Shelter staff, though overwhelmed by attention, began to worry. Lucky had not eaten much. He would not play. He barely acknowledged anyone at all. Even the children who came to see him with wide smiles and eager arms were met with the same gentle stillness. Then, nearly 2 weeks after the earthquake, a woman stepped through the shelter doors holding the hand of a little girl. It was her, the woman Lucky had helped save. Her name was Elena, and she still walked with a cane from the injury she had suffered. The little girl, Ava, wore a pink hoodie and held tightly to her mother's side. They had come not because of the headlines, but because of a promise. "She has not stopped asking to see the dog," Elena told the staff. "She calls him her angel." When they reached the kennel, Lucky looked up. For the first time in days, his ears perked. He stood. Ava let go of her mother's hand and walked to the gate. "Hi, doggy," she said softly. Lucky took one step, then another, and then slowly approached. He pressed his nose to the bars and gave the child's fingers a gentle lick, just like he had in the rubble. His tail began to sway, first slow, then quicker. He let out a soft whine, not of distress, but recognition. Elena brought her hand to her mouth, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "He remembers," she whispered. When they opened the gate, Lucky walked straight to the girl and placed his head gently against her chest. Ava wrapped her arms around his neck, giggling, and Lucky leaned in, completely still, completely safe. The shelter director looked to Elena. Would you like to adopt him?" Elena nodded through tears. "It is not just to say thank you. It is more than that." She reached down and stroked Lucky's back. "We need him, and I think he needs us too." In that quiet moment, among the clicking cameras and hushed awe, Lucky finally found what no headline could give him. Not fame, not a medal, but a home, a reason to keep living, a place to belong. Lucky settled into his new life as if he had always belonged there. Gone were the days of wandering through forests, sleeping beneath trees, or waiting behind closed doors that never opened again. Now he had a soft bed by the window, a bowl with his name on it, and a little girl who called him Angel Doggy and insisted on kissing his nose every night before bed. For Ava, Lucky was more than a dog. He was her guardian, her comfort, her best friend. She would fall asleep with her hand resting on his back, whispering secrets only he would ever hear. When she woke from nightmares, it was Lucky's quiet presence that calmed her, and when she laughed, he chased her through the yard with tail wagging, never letting her out of his sight. Elena, too, found herself healing in ways she had not expected. The trauma of the earthquake had left scars, but watching Lucky with her daughter brought a peace she had not thought possible. There was something sacred about the bond they shared, born not from convenience or routine, but from survival, from instinct, from love without explanation. In time, word spread that Lucky was doing more than just living. He was helping others heal. With the guidance of local therapy dog handlers, he was trained and certified as a community trauma dog. He began visiting hospitals, disaster recovery centers, and schools affected by crisis. Children who had not spoken in days would reach for him. Survivors would cry into his fur. Wherever Lucky went, hope followed quietly behind. In the center of town, at the exact spot where Lucky had once barked without rest, a small memorial was placed by the city. It was simple, a bronze plaque shaped like a paw print, and beneath it the words, "He barked until hope was heard." Visitors still stopped by to touch the marker, to leave flowers or photos, or thank you notes. And many never knew Lucky personally, but they all knew what he stood for. Loyalty, courage, and the reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths. On warm afternoons, Lucky would lie in the backyard of his new home, sun spilling across his back. Ava would play beside him, drawing chalk suns on the pavement or braiding flowers into his collar. Sometimes she would curl beside him with a book she could not yet read, softly sounding out words, as if telling him a story. He never moved far. He was always listening. And in the golden silence of those late afternoons, the world felt full again, of laughter, of second chances, of quiet miracles, because Lucky had once been rescued. And in return, he rescued a family, a child, a town, and perhaps in his own gentle way, the world. Sometimes, the one you rescue will rescue the world right back. Thank you for joining us for this unforgettable story of love, instinct, and the quiet power of a dog who refused to give up. Lucky reminded the world that even the most overlooked souls can become heroes. That sometimes it takes 4 paws and a faithful heart to bring hope where there was none. If this story touched your heart, just imagine how many more are waiting to be told. Subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories for more real-life tales of bravery, healing, and the extraordinary bonds between animals and humans. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. Tell us how Lucky's story inspired you, because here at Amazing Paws Stories, every bark, every paw print, and every heartbeat tells a story worth remembering. We'll see you in the next one.